There is very little natural regeneration within a hedgerow, especially a whitethorn hedge. Whitethorn is the most common hedgerow-forming species. It is a light-demanding plant, and despite the many thousands of haws produced by mature hedgerows, new seedlings rarely grow. Over time, the existing plants in the hedge will age and die, and ultimately, the hedge is lost. Fortunately, we can extend the life of the existing plants by a process known as rejuvenation. The plants are cut back hard to stimulate new growth from the base, which gives the plant a new lease of life. If this is done on a 30 to 40 year cycle, it is possible to extend considerably the lifespan of a whitethorn hedge, possibly indefinitely. There are two ways to rejuvenate a hedgerow. The first is through a technique called coppicing, and basically involves cutting each hedgerow stem close to ground level. This stimulates dormant buds in the stump to grow, and a new hedge effectively sprouts. The other technique for rejuvenating a hedge is called laying. Here, instead of cutting and removing the old hedge, the stems are selectively pruned and then partially cut through near to the ground and laid over at an angle to form a new lower hedge. A flexible hinge of wood maintains the contact between the roots and the tops, and the laid stem continues to grow. The remaining stump is cut at an angle to stimulate new growth from ground level, the same as for coppicing. In fact, you can think of laying as coppicing but leaving a bit. It is the new growth that comes from the cut stump that provides the rejuvenative growth for the hedge, and stimulating and protecting this growth is the key part of the job. Coppicing is quicker and cheaper to do than laying and requires less skill. Do remember, though, that you will have the cost of fencing off the coppiced hedge. Laying a hedge properly is a skilled job, but should be the preferred method of rejuvenation. It is better for biodiversity than coppicing, as old wood is retained, and a laid hedge can still flower and fruit, whereas a coppiced hedge may take 6 or more years before it begins fruiting again. The laid hedge also provides good nesting sites for small birds. Shelter can be very aesthetic. Where rejuvenation is needed, hedges should be assessed as to which option is the most appropriate. Very large or very old stems are not generally suitable for laying. In other cases, the amount of wire or ivy in a hedge makes the cost of laying so expensive that coppicing is a more cost-effective option. If there is decay in the base of hedgerow stems, it may not be possible to lay them, but coppicing can still be effective. If you are unsure, it is best to get professional advice, as some hedges can be beyond laying or coppicing. The official season for coppicing and laying hedges is from the 1st of September to the last day of February, although many hedge layers would argue that September is a little early and that older hedges are laid more successfully when the sap is beginning to rise in the spring. Coppicing can be speeded up by the use of a tractor-mounted circular saw. If the final pass of the saw is about the length of a firewood log above the ground, you can then come along with a chainsaw and put a final sloping cut close to the ground to complete the coppicing and cut yourself some firewood at the same time. Bigger stems can be left a little longer, but still should be no more than 10 centimetres or 4 inches from the ground. These plants were coppiced 2 years ago. Almost all coppiced hedges will be gappy, and this is an ideal time to do some infill planting. The young regrowth from coppice is very palatable to livestock and must be protected. There is a tradition of laying hedges in many parts of Ireland, although the skill has largely died out. If you want to have a go at hedge laying, we would advise you to do a training course with an accredited hedge layer. But we have put together a basic step-by-step guide that should start you on the right road. Let's have a look at some of the tools you will need. Firstly, there is your personal protective equipment. If you are using power tools, you will need to wear standard PPE. For a chainsaw, this will be a helmet, visor and ear protectors, chainsaw trousers, gloves and safety boots or Wellingtons. For general work, welding gloves give good protection against thorns. For clearing and preparing the hedge, you'll need fencing pliers, a slash hook and a rake. For pruning and cutting the hedge, you will need pruning saw, billhook, axe and a chainsaw. A mallet will be needed if you are driving stakes. Carry out a risk assessment of the site. What are ground conditions like? Are there any overhead cables? Will you be working close to a road? Will livestock be in the field as you work? There are inherent risks in hedge laying, and it's up to you to try and mitigate them as much as is possible. If the hedge is on a slope, laying uphill is generally best. Hedges along roads are best laid with the flow of traffic. In areas where there are strong prevailing winds, hedges are best laid with rather than against the wind. The first thing that you'll need to do in preparing the hedge for laying is to clear out any wire and other rubbish. Select a length to work on and open up the site by clearing out the ground vegetation like brambles and nettles. Prune the stems you have selected. You're trying to leave material that will help you to build a strong, tight hedge, so you tend to cut out crossing or very misshapen branches. Much of the skill in hedge laying is in deciding what to cut and what to leave. Before you can lay any stem, it must be reasonably free from its neighbours. Give it a quick pull to make sure it's not tangled in the head. Examine the stem for knots or rot. You need to identify an area of sound wood that will form the hinge. Select your tool for cutting. This is usually dependent on the size of the stem. Even if you use the chainsaw, good sharp hand tools are still necessary to thin down the hinge, that last little bit. On the side opposite to the direction you intend to lower the stem, make a long sloping downward cut. The cut should end a few inches above ground level. Larger stems need longer cuts. You're trying to thin the wood so that it is thin enough to bend without breaking. Knowing how much or how little to cut through the stem comes with experience. Use edge tools to lever the stem over and thin the last bit of the hinge. If you haven't cut through enough before laying the stem over, it will split back up. This is not desirable, as there is the danger that the split can run out and the layer is lost. If a stem is splitting back, thin the wood above to remove all traces of the split and thin the hinge further to allow it to bend at the proper point. If you do lose a layer, all is not lost. Just coppice the stump and move on to the next stem. The laid stem must be secured against the effects of livestock and wind. There are a number of means of doing this. Light hedging stakes can be driven in, or hooked pegs can be used. The stump needs to be trimmed to promote regrowth from ground level. This is a critical part of the job. New growth will also sprout along the laid stems. This helps to thicken the hedge, but should not be considered as rejuvenative, as the laid stems may well die off in a few years' time, once the new growth from the stump is developed. How you position the laid stems and build the hedge depends largely on the style or type of hedge you're laying. In general, you're looking to keep the laid stems parallel, as this keeps the build of the hedge tight. The idea is to use the bushy growth of the laid stem to protect the new growth that will come from the stump. Depending on the condition of the hedge and the skill of the hedge layer, it may be necessary to fence off for a year or two until the new growth is strengthened up. Once you've cut and laid the stem, trimmed the stump, built the laid stem into the hedge and secured it, you can move on to the next stem and repeat. Hedge laying can be tough work, but it is a very rewarding job. Like a lot of country crafts, it takes a day or two to learn the basics and a lifetime to master the skill. The main things to remember are good clean cuts close to the ground. The laid stems should be secure, and the new growth, which should come from as close to the ground as possible, must be protected either by thorny growth or by fencing. You don't have to look very far to find a hedge that is in need of rejuvenation. The skills of the hedger are essential to the long-term well-being of our hedgerows.